Imagine walking down a street so dark you cannot see your own hand. No streetlights, no police, no safety, just the sound of footsteps behind you in the mud, and you have no idea whose they are. This was London, not in a movie, not in a nightmare. This was real life, every single night. In the 13th century, most people think of medieval London as a romantic place. Stone castles, knights in armor, kings and queens. But the truth? It was something else entirely. The streets smelled like death. Criminals ruled entire neighborhoods. And if you were poor, and most people were, your life was worth almost nothing. But here's what will really shock you. The city wasn't just dirty and dangerous by accident. There was a system, a dark, hidden system that kept the powerful safe and left everyone else to suffer. Tonight, we're pulling back the curtain on that system. We'll reveal why London's streets were more dangerous after dark than almost anywhere in the world. We'll uncover the secret criminal networks that operated in plain sight, and we'll expose the shocking truth about who was actually supposed to protect the people and what they were really doing instead. This is not a fairy tale. This is the real London, the one history books skip over. Let me show you exactly how this happened. Cities, no running water, no sewage system, no organized police force, nothing. London in the 1200s was home to roughly 80,000 people. That sounds small by today's standards, but for that era, it was one of the biggest cities in the entire world. And with that many people packed into a tiny space, chaos was inevitable. The city was built along the River Thames. That river was everything. It was the highway, the marketplace, the dumping ground. Ships came from France, from Spain, from the far corners of Europe. They brought goods. They brought money. They also brought crime. Here's your first mini surprise. London in the 13th century had no official police. None. Zero. The concept didn't exist yet. Instead, the city relied on something called the Watch, a group of local men, mostly volunteers, often old, sometimes drunk, who were supposed to patrol the streets at night. They carried torches. They were meant to catch criminals. Most of the time they went home early. And the second surprise? The city gates actually closed at night. If you were caught outside after dark without a good reason, you could be arrested on the spot, just for being outside. Now the city was essentially admitting, we cannot protect you after sunset. Now here's the third surprise, and this one changes everything. The people responsible for keeping order, the sheriffs, the magistrates, the men of authority, many of them were corrupt, deeply, systematically corrupt. They took bribes. They protected criminals who paid them. They ignored the suffering of the poor. The system wasn't broken. It was designed that way. Now here's where things get really interesting. Let's talk about what the streets actually looked like. Close your eyes for a second. Picture this. It's past midnight. You're in the Cheapside district, the busiest market street in all of London. During the day, it's packed with merchants, animals, and noise. But right now, it's silent, mostly. The street is maybe 4 meters wide on both sides. Wooden buildings lean so far over the road that they almost touch above you. No sky visible, just darkness and wood. Beneath your feet, mud. Deep, thick mud, mixed with animal waste, human waste. Rotting food thrown from windows above. The smell is indescribable. Modern historians have compared it to an open sewer because that's exactly what it was. And then you hear it. Footsteps. Fast one. Here's something that will genuinely shock you. In 13th century London, a massive percentage of crime happened within a very specific 2-hour window, just after the city gates closed and just before dawn. That window was known among criminals as the dark hours. During the dark hours, gangs operated freely. These weren't random thugs. They were organized. They had territories. They had leaders. Historians have found court records, actual written records from the 1200s that describe gangs controlling specific streets, specific markets, specific parts of the river. One of the most feared areas was Southwark, located just across the Thames, technically outside the city walls. Southwark was a lawless zone. The city of London had no authority there. So criminals, gamblers, thugs and outlaws simply moved across the bridge. Southwark had taverns that never closed. It had gambling dens. It had people who would, for a small fee, make your problems disappear permanently. And here's the number that puts it all in perspective. In one surviving court record from 1276, A single London parish, one small neighborhood, reported over 200 violent crimes in a single year. That's almost 4 serious incidents every week in one tiny area of the city. Multiply that across dozens of parishes. The violence was constant. It was normal. People accepted it because they had no choice. But it gets darker because the most dangerous criminal element in 13th century London wasn't the street gangs. It was the people nobody suspected. I'll explain exactly who in a moment. But first, don't understand this. The poor had almost no legal protection. If a rich man attacked you, you could report it. Maybe. If you could afford the court fees. If you could find a witness willing to testify. If the judge wasn't already paid off. Most crimes against the poor simply went unreported because reporting them made things worse. This was the world the common Londoner lived in every single day. But if you think that's crazy, wait until you hear this. Here's the part of the story that historians rarely talk about. The church. In 13th century London, the church was everywhere. There were over 100 churches inside the city walls alone. That's one church for roughly every 800 people. The church owned massive amounts of land. The church controlled education. The church controlled records. And the church, in many cases, sheltered criminals. This wasn't a rumor. It was a legal reality. It was called Benefit of Clergy, and it was one of the most extraordinary loopholes in all of medieval legal history. Here's how it worked. If you were a member of the clergy, a priest, a monk, a church official, and you committed a crime, you could not be tried in a regular court. You had to be tried in a church court instead. Church courts were dramatically more lenient. Murder cases that would result in execution in a royal court. In a church court, the punishment might be a fine or a period of fasting. That's it. Now here's the twist that makes this truly shocking. Over time, criminals discovered something extraordinary. You didn't have to actually be a priest to claim benefit of clergy. You just had to prove you could read. In an era when most ordinary people were illiterate, reading was considered a priestly skill. So if you could read a single passage from the Bible, usually Psalm 51, which became known as the neck verse because it could save your neck, you could claim clergy status and avoid execution. Criminal networks in London began teaching their members to read, not for education, not for knowledge, purely as a legal escape hatch. Think about that. Organized crime syndicates in the 1200s running literacy classes so their members could escape the death penalty. The contrast with the poor is devastating. A poor man caught stealing bread could face brutal punishment, flogging, mutilation, even death. But a connected criminal who had memorized Psalm 51, he walked free. Same city, same century, completely different realities. But there's a layer even beneath this, because the real power in 13th century London didn't belong to criminals or even to corrupt officials. It belonged to a small group of ultra-wealthy merchant families. These families controlled the trade guilds. They controlled who could sell what, where, and at what price. They essentially controlled the economy of the entire city, and when those families had enemies, those enemies had a way of disappearing. Not dramatically, not publicly. They would simply find themselves ruined, banned from their guild, their debts suddenly called in, their business partners mysteriously withdrawing. Medieval financial warfare, quiet, effective, devastating. This brings us to the most shocking discovery of all. Everything we've talked about, the dark streets, the gangs, the corrupt officials, the church loopholes, and the merchant families. It all connects to one single, stunning truth. London in the 13th century was not a city that failed to achieve order. It was a city that was deliberately kept in controlled chaos. Here's what that means. The people at the top, the king, the nobility, the wealthy guilds, actually benefited from a certain level of disorder on the streets. Why? Because fear keeps people in line. When ordinary citizens are worried about survival, they don't organize, they don't rebel, they don't question authority. They just try to make it through the day. This was understood, even if it was never written down directly. The chaos on the streets of London served a purpose. It was a tool of social control. Here's the evidence. In 1285, King Edward I introduced the Statute of Winchester. This was a major piece of legislation that supposedly addressed crime and disorder across England. It reorganized the watch system. It ordered that roads be cleared of trees and bushes to eliminate hiding spots for criminals. Sounds like genuine reform, right? But look closer. The statute gave significant new powers to local lords and wealthy landowners. It essentially deputized the rich to police the poor. The people enforcing the law were the same people who owned the land, controlled the rents, and benefited from keeping lower classes desperate and compliant. The reform didn't reduce crime. It redirected its enforcement to serve the powerful. And here's the detail that completely reframes the entire story. The Tower of London, that famous fortress sitting at the edge of the city, was not primarily built to protect London from outside invaders. Historians now largely agree that its main function was to protect the king and the elite from the people of London themselves. Because the people of London were angry frequently. The city had seen riots, uprisings, and rebellions throughout the 1200s. In 1263, Londoners threw garbage, and worse, from windows onto the Queen's boat as she tried to pass under London Bridge. The Queen. They attacked the Queen. That's how much anger existed beneath the surface of the city. The tower wasn't a symbol of strength directed outward. It was a fortified bunker, kept ready for the moment when the streets exploded. Medieval London wasn't just dark because of poor infrastructure, and it was dark because darkness served those in power. So what does all this mean for us today? You might be thinking, this is fascinating history, but what does it have to do with me? More than you'd expect. The structures we see in 13th century London, corruption embedded in the system, laws that protect the wealthy while punishing the poor, institutions that appear to serve the public but quietly serve the powerful. These aren't ancient relics. They are patterns, human patterns. They appear in every era, in every civilization. When you understand them in a historical context, you start recognizing them in the present. The Benefit of Clergy loophole is just an early version of what today we might call legal complexity. The idea that those who can afford better lawyers navigate the justice system more successfully than those who cannot. The merchant guild families controlling London's economy? That's the ancestor of monopolistic corporate behavior. Different century, same instinct. The Statute of Winchester, giving enforcement power to the wealthy? You can draw a direct line from that to debates happening in democracies right now about who controls policing, who writes the laws, and who those laws ultimately protect. History isn't something that happened and stopped. It's a pattern that keeps repeating until someone understands it well enough to interrupt it. And here's the personal takeaway. The people who survived and even thrived in 13th century London were not the strongest. They were the most informed. They knew the unwritten rules. They understood which officials could be trusted, which areas to avoid, which systems they could use, and which would destroy them. Information was survival. That hasn't changed. In every complex system, whether it's a city, a marketplace, a corporation, or a government, the people who understand the hidden rules have an enormous advantage over those who only see the surface. The dark streets of London teach us something simple and permanent. The world as it appears and the world as it operates are rarely the same thing. Before we wrap up, there's one final thing you need to know. Here's the detail that almost nobody talks about. Despite everything, the danger, the corruption, the darkness, the inequality, ordinary Londoners built something remarkable. Community. In the same cramped, filthy, dangerous parishes where violence was a weekly reality, people also formed tight networks of mutual support. Neighbors looked out for each other. Parish guilds, not the powerful merchant guilds, but small local ones, pooled money to help members who fell sick, or whose houses burned down, or whose families were left destitute. They couldn't trust the system, so they built their own. That instinct to find your people, to create safety within a broken structure, to build something human inside an inhuman environment. That is perhaps the most powerful thing about the London of the 13th century. The darkness was real. The corruption was real. The danger was real, but so was the resilience. The story of medieval London is not just a story of how brutal life can be. It is a story of how people endure, how they adapt, how they find each other in the dark. We started this video with a single image. You, alone, on a dark street, footsteps behind you. Now you know what was behind those footsteps. Sometimes it was danger. Sometimes it was corruption. Sometimes it was a neighbor checking to make sure you made it home safe. The dark streets of London were all of those things at once. And in that complexity, in that messy, terrifying, surprisingly human reality, lies one of the most fascinating chapters in the entire history of civilization. If this opened your eyes to the hidden world of medieval London, there is so much more to explore. Let's bring it all together. The 13th century London was one of the most dangerous cities on earth, not by accident, but by design. The darkness served the powerful. The corruption was structural. The gangs, the loopholes, the crooked officials, they were all part of a system that kept the majority afraid and the minority in control. But the people of London didn't just suffer. They survived. They organized. They built community in the cracks of a broken world. And that story, the tension between power and people, is as alive today as it was 800 years ago. If you found this video valuable, hit subscribe. Every week, we go deep into the hidden history that shaped the world you're living in right now. And drop a comment below with this. If you had to survive one night in 13th century London, which district would you choose and why? Southwark, Cheapside, or somewhere near the Tower? Let's see what your instincts say. There's a follow-up video already waiting for you. The secret underground economy of medieval London and the people who ran it entirely outside the law. You'll want to watch that next. The history isn't over. It's just getting started.